Where are we at in society today? Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40!
Hey everybody, welcome to the I'm a Man, I'm 40 deep dive discussion of our 12th favorite James Bond movie, 1995's Goldeneye, starring Pierce Brosnan in his very first outing as James Bond. The movie has a really, I think, top-notch cast, including Sean Bean as Alec Trevelyan, Isabella Scorupco as Natalia Simenyova, as she corrects James in the movie. I hope that's the right pronunciation. We got Famke Janssen as Xenia Onatopp, and we spiced that up with a little Robbie Coltrane. We got some Alan Cumming in there. We got frickin' Mitchell himself, Joe Don Baker, as CIA stooge Jack Wade. Goldeneye is the 17th official James Bond movie overall, and Pierce is the 5th actor to take on the role. Now, before I get any further into Goldeneye, let me introduce my co-hosts for today. First up, we've got a guy who's never been punched while sitting on a toilet, although I hear he has been open-handed slapped. It's Paul Sykes. Paul, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good, guys. Good to see you guys again, and really excited to be back for our discussion of Goldeneye. I think it's a mixed bag, this film, and I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Oh, you will, my friend, you will. Now, next up, good to see you, Paul. Next up, we have a man who, if human chest pelts were currency during the fur trade, could have battled Pierce Brosnan for the most sought-after quarry. It's our resident Bond historian himself, Chris Banks. Chris, what's up, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. Good to talk Bond again after a bit of a layoff. Just started my summer holidays, so excited to do a deep dive into this.
Oh, excellent, excellent. And we'll be doing a deep dive into this and hopefully a few more very soon. Great to see you, Banksy. Next up, we have an Irishman with a considerably more convincing British accent than Master Thespian Pierce Brosnan. It's our man in London himself. It's Paul Murphy. Paul, what's shaking in Hampshire today?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's lovely to be here at a very sociable hour UK time in Hampshire. I'm having lots of caffeine. It's all good.
Give us a little hurt Brosnan acting. Channel your inner Brosnan. It hurts to be up so late.
What is it, midnight there, Murph?
Midnight, yeah.
Yeah. It's Friday night, though.
No, exactly.
Come on.
What else would I be doing?
What else?
I'd probably be watching a Bond film, to be honest. Tomorrow Never Dies is actually on ITV here tonight, so you're doing me a favour.
Oh, Pierce. All right, guys. Great to see you. Let's do a bit of a plot summary here for the folks at home, and then we'll get into where you guys rank the film and get some thoughts on it. So we have our pretty boy, Thomas Crown, a.k.a. James Bond, infiltrates an expensive London soundstage where he smugly sucker punches a guy taking a deuce before giving Boromir third-degree burns and literally flying into a pilotless aircraft. Transition now to a car chase scene with a sexy S&M train conductor who gets off crushing some fat guy's ribs with her legs and steals an Airwolf-like helicopter to aid a mysterious crime syndicate blow up a tiny model of a Russian military base. James then teams up with an outrageously, impossibly hot computer programmer who survived the explosion and speaks only in English, even to other Russians. Turns out that James's dead best friend, Ned Stark, is the baddie, and he wants to use a Soviet space satellite to, I don't know, ruin England's economy? Guys, I don't know. In order to stop him, Remington Steele uses a tank to destroy St. Petersburg before flying into Cuba, stopping the satellite and dropping 006 to possibly the most ridiculous over-the-top death in the entire franchise. Guys, where did you have Goldeneye ranked?
Well, I had Goldeneye ranked at number 12, and I think this movie is remembered fondly by a lot of people, and I think it gets a lot of the elements right. I think some of the characters are really good. I think some of the set pieces work. But there's something not right about this film. It's kind of fraying at the edges in some scenes. I think there's a lot of phoned-in elements to it. And above all, though, I just have never bought Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. I'm supposed to believe that he's the spy from the Cold War who's this misogynistic dinosaurs. But I just get the impression that this guy's been modeling in the Sears catalog, leisure wear, for the last 20 years.
Banks, you had Goldeneye sort of middle range here to low at 15. Why don't you walk me through your history with Goldeneye, or what you think about it?
Yeah, so I think Goldeneye has a pretty central place in my Bond history, because I do think it's the first film I saw as a Bond fan. So I think it's kind of around the early 90s where I started watching all these films, and this came right when I was in high school. I think I saw it in the theater twice. Loved this movie at the time. On reflection, it's not quite as good as my memory of it, and some of the elements of self-awareness that this film has.
James, spare me the Freud. I might as well ask you if all the vodka martinis ever silenced the screams of all the men you've killed. Yeah. Or if you find forgiveness in the arms of all those willing women for all the dead ones you failed to protect.
The meta aspects of this movie, and it being kind of the first post-Cold War Bond film, some of it doesn't really work for me anymore. I also think it kind of starts a trend of Bond being a superhero a little bit more than I'd like. So a real mixed bag on this film. Still some very redeeming qualities about the movie. So right in the middle for me.
All right, that makes sense. I look forward to unpacking this a bit further. But Murph, what about you? Give us your take on Goldeneye. I mean, look, you have Irish blood. Shouldn't you be pulling for Pierce here? I mean, shouldn't Pierce be your Bond?
Well, Roger Moore obviously is and always will be the only Bond to me. But I
know what your number one film is, and it still blows my mind.
I've got a bit of time for Pierce Brosnan. I think, I'll be honest, certainly during my student days, so my late teens, early 20s, I thought Pierce Brosnan was up there with contender for being one of the better Bonds. I'm not too sure I still feel that way now. I think I had this ranked at number 16. I think Pierce Brosnan looks absolutely fantastic most of the time. Just like, I mean, yes, model for a Sears catalogue, spot on. Exquisite taste in suits. His hair is, particularly in this film, is astonishing. I have no idea how he does that with his hair. It's just the right level of kind of, I don't know how a hair does that. I think it's the only word is fabulous, I think.
I will give you, it's amazing hair in this film.
But I do agree that this is a very problematic film in lots of ways. It feels incredibly cheap. It feels very, very bright, and the superhero thing was an interesting. It feels quite cartoony in places. The color saturation in some of the scenes is bizarre. There's something about this whole 90s generation of Pierce Brosnan films. You can spot them at 1,000 paces with just the font alone. They all look like computer games, and actually this was a great computer game. I think a far better computer game than it was a film. But there are loads of redeeming features about this film. Some of the stunt work, and some of the plot, and some of the writing, and some of the acting. And I do love some of the actors who are in this film as well. So I'm actually really looking forward to discussing this, because it's one of the films that I'm most divided about.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great take there, Murph. From myself here, I have nothing but good memories about having seen this movie when it came out, and I remember it very distinctly because I, like Banks, was becoming a very, very big Bond fan. And in between the layoff between License to Kill and Goldeneye, which was 6 years, I remember anticipation building and building and building. And this is in the days of before the internet. I would try and read like trade publications about what was going on with James Bond. Were we going to see another James Bond flick? So by the time it finally came out in 95, I was just like, ready to go and see James Bond. And I was ready to love it. And they could have put anything up on the screen, I think, and I think I would have been super into it. I remember distinctly they had promotional posters for this at bus stops, and they were enormous. They were the size of not quite a wall, but you guys have been to a bus stop. Like, they were huge. And I was so into this movie, my girlfriend at the time went out, she called the advertising agency who was responsible for putting up those posters and got me this giant poster, which I had on my wall in my first apartment for years. It was massive. And I would walk by it every day and just stare at Famke. I was so into Famke Janssen and that character. I thought she was so cool. I thought her outfits were so amazing. And she was I just loved it. And I wasn't a good judge of who was a good actor or not at the time, whether or not Thumper was a good actress, but I really, really enjoyed the performance. And I got so excited. And once I saw this movie, my anticipation for the next movie was at a fever pitch, which is why Tomorrow Never Dies really, really killed Pierce for me. I actually thought Pierce did a decent job in this. I was hoping they would build on it because all the Bonds, I don't think their first pictures are necessarily their best. Nobody would argue that Live and Let Die was the best, Roger Moore. I hope nobody would argue that that's the case. I don't think anyone would argue that Dr. No is the best film either. So I think that they could have built on this. That's all I want to say about that. I do want to, before we get into just running through the movie, I wanted to touch on Murphy. I made a comment on the cast there. And while I alluded to some of the cast early on, I want to talk to you guys about the supporting cast here, because like the MI6 Scooby Gang is basically reset here. So we have the first of 7 appearances of Judi Dench as M. We have a new Moneypenny, who's played by Samantha Bond, who I think sticks around for the entirety of Pierce's run. We introduced the ultimate MIC cuck. It's Tanner. Here he is, guys. And we got, man, we dragged poor old Desmond Llewellyn out of whatever coffin he was sleeping in, threw him some cue cards and got him to read a couple lines. He's back for his 53rd turn as the head of Q Branch, Major Boothroyd.
This is one of my favorite Q scenes, though. I just think that, like, you've got the idea that their relationship has developed a little bit, and you see that Q he honestly laughs at one of James' jokes and makes a joke of his own, and I really love that moment. Also, there's just a lot of like really impractical Q gadgets going on in the background that I love in a James Bond movie.
They are really
It's insanely dangerous as well. Like, it's such a dangerous workplace. This playing around with a hand grenade, like, how many seconds do you say? It's 4 fucking seconds. Turn it off. It's so dangerous. What if you drops that pen? It's game over. Seriously.
Absolutely.
The only thing that Q is worried about Bond grabbing is his sandwich.
I love it.
Do please try and return some of this equipment in pristine order. Don't touch that. It's my life.
I just saw the genuine affection between Q and James in this, and I really like that because they do have a long history.
No kidding, right? It's great. It's nice to see that development and the companionship between the two of them and their working relationship. I don't get the sense they ever hang out, but I do get the sense that, like, okay, over the years now they've developed this kinship. It's pretty cool. I like seeing Desmond here. I think he goes downhill after this. I think he's in the late stages of life here, and he's clearly reading off the cue cards, but, you know, whatever. What do you think about M, guys? This is Judi Dench. She, for some people, redefined this role.
Obviously, Judi Dench is a national treasure over here, so it actually is a criminal offence not to speak highly of her.
Right.
So I will say, it's going to be hugely unpopular. I almost don't want to say it because I'm aware that there's the possibility people might watch this. And I'm just a few. But I really didn't like Judi Dench at the time. I remember just being like, I miss. It's a completely different energy between M and Bond, and I didn't particularly enjoy it. On rewatching it, I actually really, funnily enough, really enjoyed the scenes, particularly in Goldeneye between Pierce Brosnan and Judi Dench. I think it works really well, and I think it was quite a sensible. And a bit of a brave, maybe in some ways, thing to do to actually. I mean, the world is still an incredibly sexist place, but in the 90s, it actually really was, like, sexism was well up there, and I think that actually it was quite a smart thing to do. It's a way of bringing it, or at least attempting to force it into the future a bit. What you were saying, Chris, in terms of being one of the first post-Cold War Bond films, and actually allowing that bit of conflict, but a slightly more corporate MI6, if you like, that was sort of taking on Bond and setting him up as. There's got to be some reason that he's, I know that it's gone very much Bond always goes rogue in the Craig era, but during the Pierce Brosnan era, it was more kind of like he's a bit more of an old school way of doing things, and he's maybe developing a respect for M, and M is developing a respect for him. And yeah, Goldeneye kind of felt a lot of the conversations between them in this film feel quite well written, quite well scripted.
I'm an accountant, a bean counter, more interested in my numbers and your instincts.
The thought had occurred to me.
Good. Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. A relic of the Cold War. whose boyish charms, though wasted on me, obviously appeal to that young woman I sent out to evaluate you.
Yeah, when you say that they had a bit of conflict going on there, I think it was kind of a wasted opportunity because I think the conflict dissipates too quickly. I think that she immediately goes and calls him a misogynistic dinosaur and says she has no problem sending him to his death, and then says, "But do come back alive, James." And I just thought it thawed so quickly.
She is the one who kind of sets up this meta aspect of the film. And like you said, Paul, calling him a sexist, misogynist dinosaur, relic of the Cold War. That's not language we've heard before in Bond. Bond's always been seen virtually uncritically in these films. And now, 90s politics is kind of creeping in, for better or worse, into the film. And it's through Judi Dench as the vehicle.
Right on. All right, cool, guys. Well, let's move into the let's just walk our way through the film now. We can talk about the various fun plot points that we noticed, and hopefully some Pierce hurt acting along the way. So Goldeneye opens up in Arkhangelsk. My Russian pronunciations aren't all that great, but Arkhangelsk in the former Soviet Union. I said, wait a second. Was this in the Soviet Union? And then they flash forward like 8 years,
yeah,
right?
That's correct.
9 years, yeah.
It's 1986 at the beginning of the film.
Right. Okay, perfect. So we are in a Soviet Union weapons factory. Now, this dam sequence was filmed actually in Switzerland. There's a dam in Ticino in Switzerland. And I was in Switzerland earlier this year, and I was this close to driving over there to check it out, because I was doing this whole I'm going to go and check out James Bond locations kind of travel. It's a really spectacular set. It's a cool set piece. And it's an amazing stunt. I think this is in top 10 James Bond stunts. This is for a long time, this was the highest bungee jump in the history of bungee jumps, at least, for a movie, I suppose. What did you guys think?
Ryan, do you know who hasn't seen this dam? It's Pierce Brosnan, because our first introduction to him is the most obvious stunt double. And his face, he's got this huge brow. And you can't reintroduce a character after 6 years and have that first shot of him be his obvious stunt double. It's a terrible call.
Also, you're in a 1990s film when bungee jumping is a big part of the opening scene.
At least he wasn't street luging.
And you know what, Ryan? You say this is one of your favorite stunts, but to me, the backdrop of it is just this bland gray canvas. And a lot of this movie was brought to you by the color gray, because there's a lot of just bland gray canvases in this movie.
I remember finding this stunt really, really exciting when I saw it. Genuinely blew my mind. And the fact that it was a real stunt as well. There's a lot of debate going around at the time. I remember at school, and it's it wasn't a real stunt. No, that was done with computers. It's no, it was a real stunt. A guy really did that. It's how did he not splatter into the dam? It's well, they put a platform out. But no, it's I think it's great. It's ruined somewhat by the fact that obviously it's a completely impractical way to impregnate a base, right? I mean, it makes no sense. And his best way of a little gun winch that drags him into the toilet, which I find, the pressure that you'd be under.
He also has what seems like a very powerful laser gun, which can cut through metal. Why is he running around in the facility with some crappy little pistol when he could be laser gunning people in the face? He has a fucking laser gun. All right, fine. It's like one of the leftovers from Moonraker, probably. All right. So what do you guys think about our introduction to Pierce Brosnan here? Because I think it is the least dignified intro of any of the James Bonds in all of the movies. Lazenby is pretty shit as well, but this is not great.
Beg your pardon. Forgot to knock.
Okay. Yeah, I just think when you're introducing this character after 6 years off, you got to introduce him in a toilet stall. But
I guess also, in terms of that joke, he probably figures the guy doesn't speak any English anyway. So it doesn't really matter that it's a crap joke.
I'm pretty sure that every single Russian in this movie speaks only in English, even when they're talking to other Russians exclusively in a Russian, military complex.
Can they understand English if it's not spoken in a very strong Russian accent?
Or a very poor Russian accent?
Yeah.
It's like a lot of lines in this movie, though. It's like a stand-in for a better line to come along that they never quite got to.
Look, we're introduced to Pierce here. You guys have given me a few thoughts on Pierce. Yeah, I'm not going to get too deep into it. Pierce is, of the Bonds, my 6th favorite Bond for sure. He does look, I think he's too pretty, honestly, for the role. I never really bought it. I think he's at his best here. I really do think that some of the interplay, like the exchanges between him and M and some of the other dramatic sequences that between him and Isabella, Natalia, I think they're really good, actually. I don't know why she loves him so quickly, but I do think they build to that a bit. I think what's interesting about Pierce is that Pierce was going to play, we all know this, Pierce was going to play Bond starting in The Living Daylights, and he would have just continued throughout. I don't want to dive too deep in The Living Daylights. How do you guys think Pierce in The Living Daylights would have gone?
I think about Pierce and everything else he's done in the James Bond franchise. For me, he doesn't work. And I touched upon this a lot in The World Is Not Enough review. There's just something fundamentally about Pierce Brosnan that is wrong to me. I look at Pierce Brosnan and I think, boy, this guy would make a good dad, right? And that's not what you want from James Bond. You want, like, you know, with Sean Connery's James Bond, you still know he's got a son out there who's waiting for him to come home and take him fishing. But I got news for you, Junior. He's not coming back. He's playing Baccarat, trying to seduce some baroness. He's seven vodka martinis deep. Like, that kid is 65 now. He's still looking out the fucking window. He's not coming home. Call Big Brothers. We'll get you a replacement dad.
Plenty O'Toole is in a trailer park somewhere. Looking after this ragtag.
You need a Bond who doesn't pay his child support.
Absolutely. This Pierce Brosnan, you know, is packing up his kids in a minivan. He's picking up his kids' shitty friends and taking them to Flintstones Fun Park on the weekend, right? This is not what I want from James Bond. James Bond is an escape from all the shitty choices we've made as middle-aged men, like the mediocrity we've settled for. This is supposed to be an escape from that. And Pierce Brosnan does not deliver.
Pierce does ultimately come back to his long-lost love child in Mamma Mia.
I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love? I wish I understood.
When Sean Connery delivers like a line, or even Roger Moore, they do it with this merry twinkle. They do it directly looking at you, almost daring you to take offense to what they say, because he knows you still find it sexy. Whereas like Pierce Brosnan sounds like a guy cracking jokes at the back of a porno theater, like under his breath, right? Like there's something about the delivery that isn't right.
If anybody knows that trope, it's you, Paul Sykes.
I am usually that guy. I know what it's like to mutter under my breath.
Let's bring it back to our pre-credit sequence here. I mean, this sets up the murder of Sean Bean, of Alec. Just answer one thing for me, guys. Sean Bean is standing behind. If you're going through this whole rigmarole to fake your own death, why the hell don't you just shoot James Bond in the... Sean has James Bond dead to rights. He doesn't want James Bond. Does he want James Bond to survive? I don't understand.
He throws him a Kalashnikov. And it's a chemical weapons facility. So obviously it has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of barrels of compressed gas. I've got absolutely no idea why that is. But they're also secured by a single padlock. In the most unstable sequence, it doesn't make... He's able to effectively kill or disable everybody in that room by firing off a single padlock. It looks spectacular, but it makes no sense. I love the idea of Sean Bean being almost like the classic nemesis. Like, even right down to the 006, he's blonde, Pierce Brosnan is, you know, they're both good-looking guys. They're both at the peak of sort of their career in many ways in terms of what they were doing then, certainly. And I really like that setup. But it just doesn't quite work. And clearly it relies on a huge amount being assumed and understood in the pre-credit sequence, where actually the dialogue is pretty sketchy and, it's not great.
Yeah.
It's
my
like,
thoughts exactly.
Yeah, it's like when, you know, in Attack of the Clones, when they're trying to establish this tight bond between Obi-Wan and Anakin, like you just don't see it. There's not enough there to make me believe that these guys are actually friends, because you literally have 2 minutes of them together. Yeah. And then that's it. And we're supposed to be all, oh my God, he's the baddie. What?
They tell you they're supposed to be friends instead of showing you.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Real quick, we've got the stunt where he flies into an airplane, guys.
So when I first saw this is the only thing I'll say about this. It was cheesy. And the theater kind of groaned and applauded at the same time. It was a weird moment at the theater. I think they were appreciative of the effort, but it didn't quite work. And then he flies away to right into a matte painting with the most obvious miniature.
Right.
Yeah.
This is really, I think, this is the beginning of CGI Bond. No, License to Kill is what, 6 years earlier, and nobody's using CGI in the interregnum. There's Jurassic Park, and everyone at this point thinks they have to use it, and they have to perform things that are physically impossible. How he falls faster than a plane, not so sure how that happened. I know nothing about physics, but I know that's impossible.
I kind of like that Orumov he's like, no, I want to see how this goes down too. They stop shit, like, I don't know. let's just see what he does here. It's pretty awesome, actually. So Banks, that's a good segue when we talk about computer graphics, because we'll get into the title sequence here. Maurice Binder, who was doing the title sequences since the beginning, he either passed away or he was no longer working on the films after this. They got a new crew in. The computer graphics here, very prominent. Look, all I want to say about this is I like this one so much. I love all the Soviet imagery. I love the hammers and the sickles and Lenin. And I don't care if it's computer graphics. And I also really like the Tina Turner song. What do you guys think?
I think it's a poor imitation of a better song. That's what I think about it.
What song is that?
It's Tina Turner trying to do Shirley Bassey with help from Bono and The Edge. And I don't think, these three creative talents, well, two and The Edge, get together and make this. And I really like Tina Turner, but this song doesn't do anything for me. It only works within the context of the movie. I think the idea of like Goldeneye is kind of a clunky piece of of song lyrics. So,
all right, guys, let's move on from the title sequence. Some hot takes there. Right after the title sequence, and I gotta mention this, there's a number of reasons this has to come up, but we get into this car chase sequence. Oh boy, here it is, guys. It's the DB5. It's back in action.
It's the DB5. It's the DB5. I saw that in another thing, and now I'm seeing it now.
Guys, the car chase scene.
How could you even pay attention to what car it was with the porno track playing?
The music is...
Okay.
It's like they realized at the very end, shit, we don't have a soundtrack for this. Have we got? No, we got literally nothing. Well, I'll purchase this for 100 quid. I got the rights to this, and what it is it's just this sort of weird lounge music type. It's what is that all about?
Ladies first.
So strange to put that into a film.
It's such a bizarre choice, and I would go so far as to say it's not even porno music. It's almost like an imitation porno music, like something they'd be watching in like an American Pie movie where they've all gone out and rented a porno, and it's playing in the background while the jocks have mistaken have switched their lube for crazy glue, and this is the song that's playing on the porno in the background, right? Like this is it, like it's like open source porno music.
Tell us more.
I want to know more about this film we're watching now. This sounds like a great scene.
Also, I kind of conflated Revenge of the Nerds and American Pie 2 and created a movie.
Yeah.
No.
Here's what I want to say about the music. Okay. Would you rather have, here are your options. You could have this movie and this chase scored the way it is now, or you could have as the background music Do Bow Bow, oh yeah, as the background music. How much better would it be?
That was actually
no difference.
No, I think the Do Bow Bow would make it a way better scene.
What the hell is Day Bow Bow? Day Bow Bow. Oh, Day Bow Bow. Oh yeah.
Like this music, this is the worst piece of scoring in motion picture history.
Once upon a time, there was a guy named Ferris Bueller, and he felt like taking a day off. And the hijinks that ensued.
Oh no, of course. Okay, yeah, no, yes, fine.
Closing credit sequence. Anyway, guys, I'm curious, Banks, do you like the DB5? Are you into it?
I think it was an early example of fan service.
It's one of the first. Yeah.
And it was put in there just as a little Easter egg to Bond fans. And I think for that reason, it is kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay with it here in this very brief context, because he doesn't drive it around for the rest of the movie. But I don't know. I mean, when I first saw it, I think I was excited about it. And now in retrospect that they keep bringing it back to excite people, I think I'm a little more down on it. I have one little quick story about this DB5. I was in New York a couple years ago, and there was there's a spy museum there, and they had a James Bond exhibit. So I went to this exhibit, and it was pretty bare bones. They didn't have a lot of stuff, but they did advertise it as having the DB5. And I was like, well, that's cool. I guess I'll go see the DB5. But it was not the Sean Connery DB5. It was the goddamn Pierce Brosnan DB5 from this movie. And I felt that was very disappointing. Guys, we moved to Monte Carlo, and great.
Before we get to Monte Carlo, can I just say that this is the clunkiest way to get to Monte Carlo too? Like, this is the biggest coincidence in all of James Bond coincidence that all this plot is uncovered because Famke Janssen happens to be driving the car in the same area he's taking his road test.
I had only realized that when I rewatched it recently. It's like, hold on, this whole thing, the whole reason that the UK are involved in this particular significant operation is because of this weird thing that comes down to Zenio Onatop drives like a dickhead in a Ferrari. And Pierce Brosnan also happens to drive like a dickhead and is somehow I'm being assessed, what in Monte Carlo, it makes no sense. But I'm being assessed by somebody else. I drive my DBs. No, the whole scene makes no sense.
No. Can't hear you. It sure does. It makes as much sense as any of these other movies. I think Famke looks great. I love her cheeky little, cute little coy looks at Bond. I don't know. I'm smitten with a young Famke.
So why is Bond? Why is he undergoing psychiatric evaluation? Do we know that?
And what kind
Felix
of
Leiter just had his legs eaten off.
Yeah, I was wondering. For a moment, I was like, "Why the hell is Mitchell in this or Jodan Baker?" It's because you can't have Felix in it anymore because he's been consumed by a shark, and it's we've got this continuity going on.
I thought it's because J.W. Pepper had priced them out.
Yes,
the contract demands were too high.
Most likely, he's makes some jokes. He meets Famke Janssen. There's more dick jokes that take place here, and then we
sorry, the Onatop name too. The introduction to Onatop.
Yeah,
it's one of the laziest names I've ever. It's not clever on any level, I don't think.
Ksenia Sergeyevna Onatop.
Onatop?
Onatop.
No, and the way he repeats it afterwards. I mean, it's like, oh, my name's Mary. Mary liked to have sex. Mary likes to have sex. Mary likes that. It's like, oh, come on! Like, you can't just make up a name that sounds like a.
It's coming out right as Austin Powers is coming out too, and it's already been parodied.
This is my Italian confidential secretary. Her name is Alata. Alata Vagina.
Come again?
Alata Vagina.
Taking it to another. I mean, Austin Powers. It felt like it was at least cleverer names that they thought of. This is like Andrea Doggy style. What?
Zena in the
That's
butt.
not a name.
In the butt.
Yeah.
I give it a pass. Whatever. Come on. You had Chew Me. You have Holly Goodhead. This is any worse? Give me a break.
You know when you are kind of revitalizing a franchise, though, the one thing it's okay. Like, the script is half finished. Let's just start filming. It seems they do this all the time. Can't you afford just hacks? Can you not get people better than Purvis and Wade to punch up your script?
They had 6 years, man. The script for Dalton's third movie was actually pretty decent, and it sounded really interesting. It took place in, I want to say, Hong Kong or China, and there were... Yeah, Banks, you must have done some research on this.
Yeah, I did. I think it was called Property of a Lady.
That's right.
It was based on one of Ian Fleming's novels. Goldeneye is actually the first film that isn't based on a Ian Fleming novel or short story. The name Goldeneye is based on Ian Fleming's home where he wrote the Bond novels in Jamaica. The reason they kind of scrapped that script and went with a new treatment was True Lies came out in 1994, James Cameron film. And that film had a lot of aspects to it that were somewhat similar to the Bond script. So they threw out most of it and started with the Goldeneye script.
Timothy Dalton chasing a guy on a motorbike on a horse. I can imagine that working, actually.
I'm there for that.
Yeah, I think it would be fantastic. Yeah, Dalton sadly bows out. He waits around forever, and in '94, he's like, "I'm done with this, guys." I would have loved to see Dalton come back. Maybe not necessarily in this film, but the film Property of a Lady that Banks is describing. But
they wanted Dalton to. They wanted him to sign a deal to do, I think, 3 or 4 more pictures.
Yeah,
and I think he just had decided that, like, I want to branch out and do more than Bond.
I would say, though, that like what I heard was that he wanted to do one final Bond film that combined the best elements of his 2 previous Bond films and go out with a real, like, a fantastic picture. But they wanted to sign on for 4 or 5 more, and he just couldn't commit to that.
Right.
You know, I think he does get to flex his acting muscles a lot in Beautician and the Beast. So whatever. I mean, we'll give it to him. All right, guys. So we get the sex scene. This is for sure. So when Onatopp crushes this guy's whatever stomach, like her legs aren't up around his ribs or anything like that. They're pretty low, but whatever. It's a very, for James Bond, until you get to like the Halle Berry sex scene, which is just laughable. It is kind of graphic too, in a Top Gun kind of way. This is a graphic sex scene. I like it. I just think no, I don't like it because of the I just like that they push the boundaries a little bit. Hey, it's the mid-90s, guys. People love S&M.
It was so cartoonish that I didn't get the point that it was like pushing the boundaries at all, like, or sexy at all, just because it was so outlandish.
I love that one of the very few references to Canada in the James Bond franchise is that this admiral who gets crushed to death by this horny murder lady is a Canadian admiral. Yay, Canada.
I laugh when he falls out of the closet and he's smiling. That's a good bit. Whatever,
there's a weird scene like just after this where James Bond just kicks the shit out of this cabin boy who has like, I feel so bad for that kid because first of all, he looks like he's 20. He's stuck wearing this. He's stuck wearing this like kind of Where's Waldo shirt, and he's probably just working to pay for his sociology degree. And James Bond just kicks the shit out of this poor guy.
There's a lot of serious violence and death inflicted on entirely innocent parties by James Bond in this film. We'll come on to this, but there's a lot of death which doesn't need to happen. And you're like, really? We're all okay with this, are we?
We now cut to Severnaya, Russia, where we have some sort of what is this? Some kind of a satellite. There's a big giant. It looks like the dish from Return of the Jedi. No?
Right.
Maybe not quite as big, but you know, it's there. And I guess there's some. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea what's going on here. There's a satellite. People are murdered. We got Alan Cumming as Boris. I find Alan Cumming's a good actor. Really don't much. I don't like that they speak in English, and B, the kind of slang they use is so lame, and it's so like PG-13. Like, you're a slughead. What? Borscht for brains. What?
The chief of computers will call me a genius, move me to Moscow, and give me $1 million hard currency. I think not. Besides, the Americans are slugheads. They'll never detect me.
Right.
Just doing this does not make one Russian. It is terrible Russian accent.
Yeah, he's over the top. I think she is good. You generally care about this woman.
I think she's great. I think as James Bond girls go, she's no slouch. She's no damsel in distress. Mostly, she's freaking out in the helicopter. But she's like, wake up, wake up, wake up. She's freaking out. She's not a damsel in distress. And one thing that I think is very interesting about Natalia is that she doesn't meet James until about halfway in the movie, which happens with some Bond girls. But we actually get a ton of her story before she meets James. For the most part, these girls are introduced. Their first intro to us is her introduction to James. And this girl actually has, you know, something about her, and you can sympathize with her when her friends die and for what she's actually gone through. And you get the sense that she's a survivor, like she'll fight to survive. And she's just not a one-note character, I think.
She's great. And what I will say, though, is that I think they do the script writers and the filmmakers do a huge disservice to her later in the film. I think they really shoehorn in the romance with James Bond as if we can only care about this woman in relation to James Bond as James Bond's girlfriend, James Bond's love interest. Whereas I think we care for her without any relation to James Bond.
All right, guys. Okay, so we have Xenia bust in. There's so much machine gun play in these movies. Yeah. The Brosnan movies in general, he doesn't use his Walther to like skillfully target someone. He just blows them away with AKs, and we have Xenia doing the same thing here as well.
Set design too here is bad.
What's that?
It's bland. The set design and everything here is just a gray, facility.
Who murders people maniacally better, her or Chris Walken as Zorin?
Chris Walken.
All right, but I think they make a great combo.
Because whereas I believe Famke Janssen's playing someone who's nuts, I think Christopher Walken is nuts. So no one told Christopher Walken he was shooting blanks. He just thought he was mowing down people.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move. We go back to Russia. We learn Natalia's survived. What else happened? Oh yeah, all the EMP stuff. All I want to say is it looked a lot like the Emperor, like all the little the Emperor lightning. Like here's how we make an EMP pulse. The Emperor shoots things out of his hands. It's like it's poorly done special effects. Guys, we go to now. This is one of my favorite locations in the James Bond series. They actually go to St. Petersburg and they film parts of the movie, at least, in frickin' St. Petersburg. If you're talking about the budget for this movie, I'm suspecting at least half of the budget went to greasing the palms of like sleazy Russian oligarchs to be allowed to actually film in the streets of Petersburg.
This is the Boris Yeltsin era, so that maybe they just trucked in a crate of vodka for Yeltsin.
Thanks. You must love the allusions to like the Soviet Union and the Cold War references and stuff. I find that whole backdrop of this really interesting.
I like the scene with all the old Soviet statues where he meets Yanis again.
Yeah, that is really cool. I like that. They have, I've been to Moscow and they have a statue park that's like that. It's not quite as sinister. And I doubt if you went there at night, there'd be quite as many like smoke machines, but it's really cool. And they have all these busted up old statues of Lenin, but there are a couple, and you can go around the Soviet Union. You're not going to see any Stalin statues, but they have 2 Stalin statues in this statue park, and it's really because they've been defaced, right? They've knocked his mustache off and whatnot. But I think that is based on like a thing that actually exists, or at least that's my assumption anyway. So we're in St. Petersburg. They're talking about Leon's Cossacks and stuff, I think, or Oromov's trying to blame Russian separatists, blah, blah, blah. We get some scenes here in Russia. There's a lot of boring plot stuff that I have no idea what's going on. I still don't care. They could have cut out all the exposition. It wouldn't mean anything to me at all. We get an introduction to Hagrid. Hey guys, it's Robbie Coltrane. He is a Russian guy now. Cool. I don't mind the character. What do you guys say? I will say, I friggin' love Minnie Driver. The first Minnie Driver role singing Stand By Your Man. She's great. She's great. Hot. Guys, do you like Hagrid here?
You know what? I like this scene. I think I just like it because it gives the chance for the movie to breathe a little bit more. And I'm kind of bored by a lot of the extended action scenes. So this is a nice little character moment.
Robbie Coltrane, I'd seen him before in the comedy masterpiece Nuns on the Run. And
with Eric Idle.
This is a real confusing mix of like a Scottish and Russian accent.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Just flips in and out of whatever.
Shaken but not disturbed.
So you haven't lost your delicate sense of humor, Valentine, huh?
All you need for an audience. I'm strangling the cat. Strangling a cat.
So I just like the idea that they were setting up a character early on in the Bond series that they could ultimately go back to and develop a rapport where you could understand. I mean, they do set some background that you have a history together, and that comes up later in The World Is Not Enough. I just think it's shitty they killed him off in that movie after 2 appearances. Like, I don't know. I thought, for what little affection I have for any of the Brosnan era characters, I like this guy. I think he's fun. All right. We move on. So basically he's here talking to Robbie Coltrane because he wants to meet Janice. We still have no idea who Janice is yet. There's some more interplay between Bond and Xenia. This is a great, I love this scene that's in like the Russian bathhouse. I really like the interplay between the two, and I love the "no more foreplay" line. That is I think that's one of my top 10 favorite Bond lines, and I think the delivery is very good.
No. No more foreplay.
I remember finding it a bit sexy when I saw it as a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah.
I'm appalled to say.
I'm a man who has like endless amounts of Lego and the Death Star. I'm still a 14-year-old boy. I still think it's sexy. This is okay, anyway.
So when I watched the film with my wife a while back, she sort of said, "Oh, I think this Xenia Onatop's a bit of a feminist icon."
Hey,
but I think she saw it as a bit of a, hey, it's pretty cool that there's a female character who seems to get a sexual thrill out of killing misogynists.
Right.
Which was just kind of, and there is something about her. I mean, it's quite nice to have somebody who is clearly their character is just, she is a pure psychopath.
Yeah.
Is that any difference than Grace Jones?
Fatima Blush as well.
Right.
Is kind of the most similar villain. She's a complete psychopath that enjoys killing people and gets off on that. So I don't think she's totally original, but at the same time, I think she's kicking ass, and that's a first.
Yeah,
to see a woman actually fighting and kicking ass and toting a machine gun and all that.
Have you ever seen this film called Aliens?
I don't remember the part where Sigourney Weaver fucks someone to death.
That was on the cutting room floor. How do you think Bishop got
like, Aliens 3?
Yeah, that's why Bishop is bisected.
Look, it doesn't mean we're engaged or anything. All right, so we get the reveal of Alec as Alec is Janice. He's the head of this organization. The one thing I'll say about this scene before you guys get into it is I really like that, and I didn't notice this before, that Alec calls out fucking Pierce Brosnan on his like glib remarks and pithy comeback.
What's the matter, James? No glib remark? No pithy comeback? Why? Hilarious question.
It's like, what, you don't have any smart ass remarks to say to me? Because that is such a hallmark of Pierce's, and I like that at least somebody acknowledges it. And I like the scene overall. It's a cool setting, and I don't know, it wasn't a surprising reveal for 5 seconds. It's so obvious what was going to happen, but okay, and you get the Cossack tie-in or whatever reason they have for justifying this. I don't know.
Obviously, there's a big dramatic build-up to the fact that, oh, who's this going to be? It's like, well, it's obviously going to be the James Bond bad guy. We know that's Sean Bean because that's been made abundantly clear in all of the trailers that we've seen and all of the publicity material. So unless you have literally somehow managed to seal yourself away in a box and never have no knowledge of this film until the moment that you see it, there is no tension at all in this idea that it's a mystery. But
just even story structure, just introducing Sean Bean and making if somebody's going to get killed off so quickly, they're not going to have such a prominent role at the beginning. So you're kind of waiting for him to come back the whole film. Just a note about the name Janus. Oh. It's a Roman god of duplicity. So it's and transitions. And then we're going to talk about the Cossacks. I did a little digging into that, which means like read the Wikipedia article.
That's all the level we expect on this podcast.
Yeah, just some real half-assed research. But at the end of World War II, during the Yalta Conference, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill agreed to return these repatriated Cossacks who were actually fighting against against the Soviet Union,
right,
back to Russia, and many of them had kind of integrated with the British Secret Service. And so this was a real thing. This really happened. A lot of them committed suicide before they went back to the Soviet Union, and the ones that came back went, I think, mostly to the Gulag. So
I don't understand. Stalin was just so cash about this stuff. He was a real relaxed dictator who was willing to let things go. All right. That's interesting, Banks. I wasn't sure if that was based on anything historical or not. I certainly heard of the Cossacks, but I didn't know the backstory there. So that's pretty cool. I like that they worked in this movie does work in some historical references in an appropriate way, I think. If we move into, I got to talk about the tank set piece action sequence, guys. So some of this is shot in Petersburg, which is really exciting. A lot of it's shot on a soundstage. I think they do it pretty well. I think this is a legendary James Bond scene. Go ahead. Have at me. Yes.
I think this is the highlight of the film for me. I do enjoy this tank scene with the exception of like some very obvious product placement.
Perrier
smashes through the Perrier thing. But one question I have is why does he feel the need, even though he can clearly drive the tank inside, why is he on the outside for most of this time? What's the purpose of that? Oh, Perrier.
I think it's just to mug, isn't it? Because we didn't pay for that coif for him to sit inside the tank.
See that pretty hair.
Murph, you like the scene?
I do. I think it's just great. This in St. Petersburg and all of these iconic, locations within it. I think it's a great space to have a scene like that. Yeah. It's a great idea. And you can imagine it as they were working through it. I mean, it's great to have. What's better than a car chase? Well, we have a car chase where at least one of the vehicles is a tank. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's a really, really good scene.
There's a point at the end of the tank scene where he's done all this shit, and then the baddies are talking in this train. And James sneaks up on them in the tank, and he just spies on them. They don't hear. I mean, he's from here to my kitchen, away from these guys, and he's just crept up on the tank and is like watching what they do. That doesn't make any sense. And then they get onto this this goofy-looking prop train, which is not a train I'm sure that exists.
It's a missile train, isn't it?
The train takes off and is going for like a minute at presumably high speed. And then he somehow gets his tank ahead of the train into a tunnel and then is able to head off the train. It doesn't matter, does it? It doesn't. Okay, it doesn't matter. This is on the train where Trevelyan has Natalia, sorry. This is where I think his character takes a real weird turn. Paul?
Yeah, so it wasn't enough that this guy is a mass murderer and betrayed James and MI6. They had to make him a creepy rapist too. I think that this is the real way where the film tries to be self-aware about, it's the 90s now, and then it's just completely tone deaf in another area, where I don't think they needed this level of sexual violence. And then Alex says something to Natalia along the lines of like, "Ooh, me and James, we shared everything." Is he alluding to previous spit roast type scenarios? Or is he wanting to get into a current spit roast type of scenario? I just don't understand where this line is coming from. I don't understand where the sexual violence is coming from. Someone help me out.
I pointed it out. I wrote down in my notes here how I was really, really surprised by his casual sexual assault. Like he sexually assaults her flat. He's like licking her face and stuff. It's so gross. And I don't buy it at all from anything that we know about the character.
Right.
Or anything we just know about human behavior. I mean, this is the problem. It's like, if we wanted to say, this is offensive to women, it's offensive to all people. It's because it's like, what a human being in a very high stress situation is. This is a high stress situation now. They just escaped from a fucking tank chase, half of them, haven't they? And they're off to do some really important stuff. And if it goes wrong, everything this guy's been doing for the last last decade of his life is all going to amount to nothing, and all he's thinking about is sexually assaulting somebody at that precise moment. It's absolutely bizarre, and I don't know what is supposed to add to it other than just be like, just in case you weren't sure, he's definitely a really bad guy who is unredeemable in any sense. Maybe they thought, just let's throw that in as well, but completely unnecessary.
Maybe it's for the Cossacks who watch the film. They're kind of on the inside. They're like, oh, we can't support this guy now.
Oh, that's it. I'm out.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. It's very important. You keep the Cossack audience on.
The Cossack demographic is an important demographic.
Yeah.
You know how I think this would have worked if they had given all that to Xenia. If Xenia was to pull a move like that and get all flicky, wouldn't that have made more sense with that character?
It would have made way more sense with that character.
I think that's too risque for the Bond producers at that time to have like sexual advance. I don't think they had done any. The previous highest profile representation of homosexuals in the James Bond series was
Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd.
Correct.
If God had wanted man to fly,
he would have given him wings, Mr. Kidd.
Okay, cut to Cuba, guys. So, look, we got James driving the BMW. Wade shows up in some prop plane. They engage in a little sexy locker room talk. I want to comment on the suit. I think the suit plays. Come on, nice tan.
I never noticed that. What suit are we talking about?
No, the suit that he's wearing at the end in the final. He's on there on the beach. He's having this like contemplative moment. It's a really beautiful shot when he's on the beach and there's like this sunny background and Natalia walks up in her weird 90s sexy, see-through outfit. I don't know.
It looks like a Cialis ad. Like when I was watching that, I was like, I've seen this before. And I don't know where. He's staring out, looking at the ocean, like being like, she's coming up to him, being like, it's okay that you couldn't perform. There's something for this, right? And at any given moment, I'm expecting to be like, ask your doctor if Cialis is right for you. Possible side effects include your woman not thinking you're man enough without Cialis. I just was waiting for something because it's so weird.
If you've got no bullets in your Walther PPK. What I don't get is now that they've gone all the way to Cuba, they decide to have like a little sexy vacation.
Right. It's really weird.
Right.
What's going on? Well, how do they have time to do this?
And this conversation they have is like it's from another movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what movie these two characters were watching, but they have this whole back and forth, like, you're just going to kill him, you're such a brute or something like that. Like, he's going to go kill the homicidal maniac and you're upset about it. I don't know where any of this dialogue is coming from.
You think I'm impressed? All of you with your guns, your killing, your death, for what? So you can be a hero? All the heroes I know are dead.
Talia, listen.
How can you act like this? How can you be so cold?
I mean, boys with toys. I don't know. It's not good. I like that they're trying to do at least have a little bit of intimate time with the two of them together, which I don't know if you always see with James and his girls, where they just end up in some boat at the end of the thing and they're ready to bone. At least there's some interplay, and they're trying to develop.
The point was they didn't need this though, because she already liked her as a character, right? And this is such a shoehorned in developed the relationship. So there's something at stake moment. Then nothing seems authentic about it. Just like the when she says to him on the beach, "You're so cold." He's like, "That's why I'm still alive." And she's like, "No, that's why you're still alone." What the fuck are these two people talking about? What movie is this?
It's fine.
No, it's not. Help me out. Banks, Murphy. Does this seem naturalistic in this movie?
That dialogue is also just going back to what we said earlier about trying to psychoanalyze Bond and figure out why he's so cold. And I want him to just say, "Hey, my wife died on Her Majesty's Secret Service."
Yeah.
And I decided to just be a playboy after that.
Yes.
And also, I'm a secret agent.
And I'm a secret agent. That's why I got to kill the bad guy.
I mean, you were with me when I murdered 12 Russian men the other day, right? You were there for that. This stuff grinds you down. But that's the obvious answer, isn't it? And another point is, I'm not interested in why James Bond is, why are you so cold? I'm not interested in his personality. When are you going to do some stuff? When are you going to shoot some stuff? When are you going to drive some fast cars?
Yes.
I couldn't
totally
give
agree.
less of a shit.
James Bond should be a static character.
the cardinal sin of so many films recently is to over-explain character motivations. That, like, the problem with every Star Wars film since the original trilogy is trying to get everything wrapped into a neat little bow, everything connected. And it's much more compelling to not know much about your characters and have to infer a lot about it. And that's, this film is kind of breaking that rule a little bit.
Right.
Also, if they did less of it, there'd be more blowy uppy time.
Right. Like there's something so ham-fisted that she says to him, when you said you didn't care about me, I meant nothing to you. Did you mean it? He met her 24 hours ago. He's seen his wife riddled with bullets. One of the girls he used to see got eaten by dogs. Of course you mean nothing to him. Where is this coming from?
My best friend's legs got eaten by a shark in the last movie.
You're right.
And then we went fishing.
How much are you supposed to mean to me after 24 hours?
Oh man, boy, if you guys are gonna pick it apart like this. Okay, speaking of blowy uppy time, we get James infiltrating the modern version of the hollowed out volcano lair, which is a giant satellite dish that is in Cuba underneath a lake for whatever reason. And then it emerges from the lake, and here we're going to have our final showdown with, Trevelyan here. I think it's a good sequence. I think it's I like the location a lot. I would have loved to have visited this giant Puerto Rican satellite, but as I'm sure you guys know, it collapsed on itself about 6 months ago. There's a really cool video, if you Google this, you can watch it just because they knew it was going to happen. So everybody abandoned it, but they set up all these cameras on it, and then it collapses in because it hasn't been maintained in years and years and years properly. And I would have loved to, like, of all the major James Bond locations, there's very few that to me like really stand out that I was like, oh, that's worth a trip to go and see. Like Pete's Gloria in Switzerland, always wanted to see it. Finally, I can't wait to talk about it when we get to OHMSS. Like James Bond Island in Thailand would be cool. I don't know if you guys can think of other ones, but I always thought of the Brosnan era. This would be like unique. But what we're there for is the showdown between Pierce and Alec. Does the final showdown deliver in terms of the final confrontations we've seen between Bond and various other supervillains?
I think it's really hard to rewatch action sequences and give them a fair shake. Like that one because they make the impact the first time you see them, and if they're a little bit long, they're kind of hard to watch the second and third times. You're just kind of bored and you hope it's over with already. So right. I think it's an effective scene, though. This is what I really appreciate For Your Eyes Only, where there's no boss fight. She just shoots him with an arrow, and that's it.
That is pretty cool. Yeah. Well, no chit chat. No like this is for my father. Just blows him away with the frame.
I don't think these films need to be kung fu movies. And I think one of the problems I have with the Daniel Craig movies is that they are just these uber choreographed Jason Bourne-esque kung fu films, and I think this is kind of the beginning of that trend.
Yeah. It definitely is. It starts to be where James Bond stops being just like this separate entity unto itself and just becomes like generic action picture.
Yeah.
What about so the line where he drops him for me, I like this line. I say it in my head a lot when I just walk around and think about things like, no, for me.
For England, James? No. For me.
I think it's a good delivery of the line.
Wait, when you're buying coffee? Like, when does this come up? Is that for your friend? No, for me.
For me. Just in my head. I don't say it out loud.
Okay.
But I think about it sometimes. Also, I think no more foreplay sometimes too, because I'm not, anyway, I don't have the patience. So he drops him. And this is why earlier on when I sort of did the intro, I find this even more ridiculous than Kananga Balloon, because he falls 20 stories from this thing. And
there's 2 drops of blood.
there's maybe 2 drops of blood. And when he falls, he is falling head first, right? And then somehow he lands on his back long enough to watch the entire superstructure collapse on him and also let out a scream. I would be like, thank Christ, because every single one of his bones and organs would be liquefied.
Yeah, this guy's like Rasputin. He just won't die.
It's a good death, though. I mean, I don't know. It's ridiculous and over the top, but whatever. They're trying to make this movie really memorable, so they give Sean Bean a fun.
Again, it's one of these easily explodable bad guy layers. Again, he has stacked it sky high with flammable liquid. And the mere process of chucking a little pen grenade, which, by the way, I know we're supposed to be following the number of clicks, but it doesn't quite work as a tension. It's supposed to create tension, and it doesn't seem to do it, because I can't work out. Am I supposed to be, how many clicks am I supposed to be counting? And I'm not sure if I counted the first set, so I don't know whether it's about to go off, it's not about to go off. But in the end, he's able to he's able to destroy the entire satellite by putting I think a broom handle in a chain.
But I will say this is also the unsexiest ending to a James Bond film, and I'm including On Her Majesty's Secret Service, because at least necrophiliacs are getting off to that one. This one includes Joe Don Baker at in your ending, right? Which is the least sexy way to end any movie.
You're gonna meet Cialis after that.
Man, you just said Joe Don Baker and Cialis in close conjunction to one another. I don't like the images. I don't like it.
I'm sure he uses it.
What's that?
I'm sure he's a big consumer.
Is Joe Don Baker Scott?
I don't know if he's still alive.
Is he?
Yeah. I would have heard about this if
he's 85, guys.
No.
He's 85. He's still kicking.
Still going.
Don't worry about it. He's still out there. We're gonna see.
Popping those blue pills.
Guys, that brings us to the end of the movie. And what I want to know now is, I'll get some closing thoughts. And while you give me your closing thoughts on this, if you have them, would you re-rank it? Would you change it from where you initially had it? Who wants to start me out? Banksy, what do you think, buddy?
Yeah, I think it probably will end up in a similar position. Maybe we'll be bumped down by other risers, but I think other films may I think it's probably going to stick around the same place. A large part of my enjoyment of this film is just the nostalgia for the video game. The video game was a huge part of my nearly ruined my university career. It was so addictive. It's hard to even separate some of the music and some of the locations from the video game. But it's definitely an interesting way to reboot the Bond movies, but it in retrospect isn't my favorite. It isn't what I'm looking for in a Bond movie.
That is fair. That's fair. Paul Sykes, what about you, man?
Well, you know what? I would put it into the faller category, but I have so many fallers, there's nothing to take its place. Like everything I've ranked, like, well, I'm going to drop this one. Oh, I'm going to drop this one 5 spots. So it'll probably hold its spot just because the elements that work, there's something here. It doesn't come together for me. Like I say, it's fraying at the edges. A lot of the script is lazy, and Pierce Brosnan fails in every aspect for me. But these movies are all shit, so number 12 sounds good.
Yeah, okay. That's totally a fair take. Would you say you prefer the video game?
I've definitely sunk more hours into the video game. The video game, I watched some YouTube videos of the video game. It holds up as poorly as this movie holds up.
Oh, no.
I would love to sit down and get high and drink off-brand cola and play a couple hours of Goldeneye till like 3 a.m, like we used to do in McLean's basement, where we had no dates or no prospect of dates, and do a little bit of a podcast on that. But we'll see what happens.
You know, there are 4 of us, and it is a 4-player game, so I'd be on board with that. I have no idea technically how we would pull that off, but I have played so few video games since the early 90s, but I did play a ton of Goldeneye when I was living with Pete Langford down on Balaclava. We would play this, and I'm sure Pete was very high while he was playing it. But, yeah, we played this a ton, and Some of the musical cues, I think, as Banks said, are exactly the same. I mean, they take the score and they put it into the game. The locations, again, I didn't realize when I was playing that game how closely the plot kind of tied into like the missions you would pull off in that game. I still think it's a fun game. Murphy, did you ever play Goldeneye?
Yeah, I never had a Nintendo system, so I could only play it at my friend's house.
Yeah, okay.
And I was so taken with it. I couldn't believe how exciting it was, and again, how much it reminded me of the film, and I love and the multiplayer aspect of it. Yeah,
super fun.
Just going around chopping people when you ran out of everything else.
It's the first time that I can think of you could really immerse yourself into the James Bond world and become that guy, right? In a blocky 90s graphics kind of way.
I think ultimately that game was far more influential than the movie. That game really launched first-person shooter games as a huge thing, and multiplayer. The film didn't leave a huge legacy.
No, and the game also made you have to have 3 friends. So I thought it was a real inroads to sociability.
So you had to make 3 more than you had.
Yeah. Exactly. It was a challenge.
Murphy, your overall thoughts on the movie and if you would change where you put it?
I think I'd change where I put it. I think it would stay number 16. Overall thoughts, I feel like I've really laid into it in many ways this evening, and I feel guilty because I do have a soft spot for it. There's something, it made some genuine efforts aspects of it are very iconic. There are still parts of it that you can still remember. They stand out in your head as being like, oh yes, I can immediately picture that film. You can't say the same about certainly a lot of Brosnan films, but you can say that about Goldeneye. They made some genuine efforts to think through how they were going to relaunch the franchise. Had it been as poor a film as, say, Die Another Day or Tomorrow Never Dies, I think we'd probably be looking at the franchise might well have just ended there. Certainly, I think Pierce Brosnan's run would have ended there. So yeah, it's got a lot of redeeming factors. The problem is it feels very cheap. It feels very sloppy. Some of the lines just feel appallingly shoehorned in. And as I say, I do have a pet hate for so many of these scenes where characters just do things that don't make any sense. So I'm very conflicted on it. And I think 16 is almost exactly in the middle. So, sort of a bit lower than the middle, which feels right to me.
I'm surprised. This isn't your most favorite Pierce Brosnan movie either, is it?
No, The World Is Not Enough.
That's a bit shocking, but I can see it. That is also not a terrible movie, but it's certainly nowhere near the rest of these.
Big Denise Richards fan.
Well,
a sign of quality.
Her stardom transcends all international borders, and she is a legend. She's a living legend. For me, guys, I don't have a lot to add to what you said already. I can't dissociate myself from like the nostalgia I feel for this movie and determine whether or not that is influencing sort of how I feel about it now. I just can't. It's too wrapped up in my head. I was so excited when this film came out, and I still get giddy watching some of the scenes. It's so stupid. I mean, I was sitting here watching it, talking to the screen the entire time, basically insulting Pierce Brosnan the entire time because he's not my Bond. He will never be my Bond, but I think he's at his best here because he was the keenest. He looks so tired and so over it, and he knows by the time Die Another Day rolls around that the scripts are garbage. Like I think he's frustrated with what's happening as well, and you see that. He doesn't even try to put on an English accent in that movie, not very well. And in this one, at least he's enthusiastic, so I think that comes across. I do think the script has holes, but I mean, who cares? I think that the female characters are given a lot more to do here. You have 2 really good female, you know what? No, 3 when you throw Em into, although she's very briefly seen in this movie. I think it establishes a great character there. And I think there's so much hope with this movie, like so many of the movies, and I was really eagerly anticipating the rest. And I think for a reintroduction in the 90s, I don't know what else you're going to do. I don't know where else you were going to go with this. Is there a different actor you'd want to see? I mean, I'm sure Paul Sykes is going to say literally anybody.
Literally anybody.
Better here. Get Roger Moore back, for fuck's sake. Who cares, right? But I still like it. Would I change my ranking? It might crack the top 10. None of us have cracked the top 10. I got to squeeze one Brosnan Guys, that's it for our conversation on Goldeneye. I'm a Man, I'm 40. We'll return with our deep dive discussion of our 11th favorite James Bond film, which is Never, Never, Never Say Never Again. Murphy will not be joining us for that movie. Till then, we got nothing else for you. Take care, everybody.
No. No more foreplay.
Maybe you two would like to finish debriefing each other at Guantanamo.